guys in the dark.
My name is Kathy Kleiner. Every now and then I like to duck into a bookstore with my husband, Scott, and head straight for the true crime section. I'll scan the shelves until I spot it. It's a book on the serial killer Ted Bundy. The stranger beside me, maybe, or perhaps the only living witness. Whatever it is, I've most likely probably read it already. But I grab it off the shelf anyways, and I flip through it until I find my name. Then I'll look directly at my husband, and I'll grin. "Now you find a book with your name in it," I'll say with a chuckle. You wouldn't know it by watching me joke around, that I would be holding a book about the man who had almost killed me. I was 20 when Ted Bundy had crept into my bedroom at Florida State University. I was 22 when he was sentenced to death, and 32 when he was finally strapped into the old Sparky, Florida's electric chair. As the years had went on, I would have tried to forget him. But instead, I just wanted to figure him out, which is why I usually am so comfortable in the true crime section of any kind of bookstore. There are so many books about him that I've been able to dedicate an entire section of my library to them, and books are just the tip of the Bundy iceberg. This Bundy binge, as the killer's defense lawyer has called it, comes in the forms of movies, documentaries, Oxygen Channel specials, t-shirts, greeting cards, Tumblr fan accounts, and everything else. Much of the Bundy content declares somberly that Bundy was horrible, but yet there's an undeniable, flattering undertone to some of it, given that Bundy's good looks and superficial boy-next-door charms have become a core part of his legend. The year that he was arrested, the New York Times had called him Kennedy-esque. Even at one point, in 2018, I had signed up for Twitter, and a Ted Bundy fan account had responded to my first tweet, saying, "Oh, there you are, Kathy." I really don't mind any of that, nor the movies, or the t-shirts. In a way, I'm glad that people are still talking about the man who had tried to kill me. He was living, and breathing, and he did what he did. And at some point, he was possibly even a real person. I think that it's good for people to read books about him. I really do. They need to know that there's evil out there, and that they definitely can control it. I had learned to fight for my life long before Bundy had ever opened my bedroom door. In the fall of '76, I had enrolled at FSU in Tallahassee, and pledged Chi Omega after being recommended for admission by my high school pal, Susie White. As a freshman, we lived in an all-girls dormitory, but my parents had convinced me to move into the sorority house for my sophomore year. It had a house mother and combination locks on the doors. My parents said that I would be safer there, so they thought. That December, me and my mom had spent hours shopping for new bedding and decorated the room in shades of white and green. During this time, my roommate, who was a junior named Karen Chandler, took equal care of both sides of the room, and were proud of the result. We had kept a little trunk between the beds, which housed books, a lamp, and my glasses. Chandler had hung plants in holders from the curtain rod, and we had never closed the curtains. Our windows had faced the back of the sorority, and since they were on the second floor, we both felt safe leaving the windows uncovered. I really did like how the sunlight was always pouring in. January 14th, 1978 was a Saturday, and that morning I had dressed with care to attend a wedding at nearby Wesley Chapel. I'd been attending the little church since my freshman year, and even dated a boy who was named David, from the congregation, mind you. The bride was a nursing student, and a really good friend of mine. After the reception was over, I went back to Chi Omega, changed into my pajamas, which was a yellow flannel nightgown that I had just gotten for Christmas, and I decided to study in bed. I read quietly on the other side of the room. Around 10:30 p.m., my roommate had turned off their light and decided that they would go to sleep. Around 3 a.m., our bedroom door had creaked open. A dark figure had crept in and tripped over the little trunk between the beds. I suddenly had woken up. I remember that noise of the trip, and something was falling off the trunk, and that had woke me up. The room was dark, and I didn't have my glasses on, but I remember seeing a black mass. I couldn't even see that it was a person. I saw the club, saw him lift it over his head, and then slam it on me. The first time it didn't hurt. It was just pressure, like something pressing on your arm, and then he had hit me again. and I think that's where he hit me in the face and broke my jaw in 3 places, and then suddenly I had passed out. But that's what I remember the most. Him lifting the club and bringing it right down on me. The room was so small that Bundy basically was able to hit my roommate with one side of the club, spin around, and then hit me with the other side. But before he could bring down a death blow on either one of us, our bedroom door was flooded with light. Outside of our back door, a sorority sister, named Nita, was getting out of her boyfriend's car after a late date. Because we never had closed our curtains, the car headlights were shining straight into our bedroom. I had saw the light. It was like God's light. I remember thinking, oh my God, something cleared the room. Bundy had raced downstairs. I guess that he thought that he was seen. In fact, he was seen. The girl getting out of her car had spotted his distinctive profile, thin lips, sharp nose, and would later provide the only eyewitness testimony at his trial. While she was telling another sister what she had seen, they saw me stumbling out of my room, covered in blood. When they had moved to help me, they saw my roommate sitting up in bed, rocking and moaning. Before long, paramedics were bending over me, telling me that I had been shot in the face. I tried to scream, but with a shattered jaw, a torn right cheek, and a tongue almost bitten in half, I couldn't make a single sound. The paramedics had lifted me into a gurney and took me down the wooden stairs. I saw all the faces of the sorority sisters crowding above me. Outside, the air was full of flashing police lights. I was freezing and confused. The scene looked like some sort of carnival. In the emergency room, the doctors had cut off my Christmas gown and stared down at my underwear, confused. I heard them wonder out loud if they should give me a rape kit examination, a thought that filled me with terror. But then I noticed a familiar face in the crowd of doctors. It was the bride from that morning, working a training shift at the ER on her wedding night. I had heard her say, with such a brutal attack, what are the chances that he would put her underwear back on? My friend had stroked my hair, and for the first time that night, I had felt my fear drain away from me. After spending a week in the hospital with my jaw wired shut, and a guard at the door at all times, the police had led me back to Chi Omega, so that I could tell them if my attacker had anything from her room. At my door, they lifted the yellow crime scene tape so that I could look and duck under it. There was blood splattered all over the wall. My green and white bedspread was covered with it. It was all over the place, on the walls and everything. That really stays in your mind. I can see it right now as I'm typing this. I spent the next few months healing at my parents' home in Miami, as undercover cops had kept watch across the street from me. I had met with an oral surgeon, who had to re-break my jaw, realign it, and wire it shut once again. Bundy was caught on February 15th. His name meant nothing to me, as I hadn't been following the murders out west. And his face didn't ring a bell either, since I technically didn't see it when he was looming over me. For the next 9 weeks, I ate only what I could slurp through my teeth. Even though I was surrounded by my family, I was desperate to hear from my sisters, but no one was returning my phone calls. This was my first taste of loneliness, especially as a Bundy victim in a world of news about him. I had survived a brush with one of the most dangerous men in the country, and yet in some ways, I was on my own. The cameras had swarmed around him, and the world was moving on. I hadn't been around any of my sorority sisters since that attack, and they're all moving forward, and here I am, stuck in a bubble. In the meantime, Bundy groupies were showing up at his courtroom appearances, swooning every time the killer grinned at any one of them. I may have been small, but I definitely was fierce. The newspapers later would call me a belligerent survivor. 3 months later, I took a job as a cashier at a lumber yard to overcome my fear of strange men. I was also planning a wedding. My boyfriend had proposed right after that attack, and our families had loved the idea, as marriage seemed like the perfect way to keep me safe. I was married in June in a long-sleeved, high-neck dress that my parents had picked out for me. Right after the wedding, I took a job as a bank teller, where I was promptly robbed at gunpoint by an attractive male stranger. I had took my afternoon off, and then returned the very next day. During the springtime, the Chi Omega murder trial was moved to Miami, since no judge could be found in Tallahassee. When the day came for me to testify, I walked up to the witness stand and saw Bundy staring at me from the defense table, holding his chin in a casual gesture that would become his courtroom trademark. The look that he gave me wasn't intimidating, or furious, or pleading. It was just emotionless. He was just staring me down. I wasn't scared at all. I wasn't angry, so much as a throwing up feeling. It was bad. It was disgust towards him. I answered every single question, looking straight at him. After the prosecutor had finished, the defense only had one question for me. Did you see him in your room? I was forced to reply that I had only seen a shadow. It was a frustrating moment for me, but that didn't save him at all. On the 24th of July, he was found guilty finally, and a week later sentenced to death by the electric chair. I had moved forward alone. In 1980, I had returned to Chi Omega House, walked up that curving wooden staircase, full of dread. As I had climbed, I would almost see myself coming down the stairs on the gurney. I passed Margaret's room and Lisa's room, two of Bundy's victims, and then I turned into the room that used to be mine. I expected to see the blood all over the wall, and my dirty linens, bloody and crimson. Nothing was the same. I took a deep breath, I turned around, and I was so glad when I did it. My marriage was breaking down by this point, but at the end of 1980, we both had got miraculous news. I was pregnant. When my son was 2 years old, me and my husband filed for divorce. 4 years later, I began dating Scott, one of my theater friends from high school. He was the only person with me on the night of the 23rd, which was Ted Bundy's last night on Earth. I would say it was the Floridian event of the decade, drawing more TV cameras than the Pope's visit 2 years earlier. But we both had sat through it alone. When the district attorney had called me to tell me that Bundy was dead, I began wailing and rocking back and forth, as a friend of mine had tried to hold me. Margaret and Lisa were flashing through my mind. As I had cried, I felt something change in me. All the angst, it was lifting. I felt so clean after that. I got dressed and went to breakfast. And then I went shopping for a new car, and I stopped for lunch. It was just a normal day. I didn't want him to have any more influence on me. In many ways, I have moved on from Bundy. Some days, I'm not even into the true crime bookstore bit all that much anymore. At the end of the day, I think I was a bigger part of his life than he was of mine. I believe that my life is so much more than the tale of a girl who survived a serial killer, no matter how many times my name appears next to Bundy's books. I'm still very, very much the same person as I was in high school. So much of me has not changed as a result of the attack, which is what I find to be really amazing. My roles are many: mother, actress, lumberyard cashier, bank teller, wife. It has all made me stronger, and it gave me more to live for, and it taught me nobody's going to put me down. Yes, that night happened, but though the rest of the world might read about it obsessively, I read it as just one night of my life, a very dark night, but also the night where light had poured in through the window and drove the darkness away. In 1999, I was 10 years old, and I was staying at a family friend's house in Del Rio, Texas, with my 7-year-old sister, while we had waited for our family to move with us from Kansas. I was staying in a room with a 13-year-old named Kathy, the daughter of the family, keeping us, as my sister had slept in the other room. One night, on December 31st, 1999, Tommy Lynn had broke into the Harris house, which I was staying in, and had stabbed the girl multiple times before slashing her throat. Me, hearing my friend scream, I woke up to watch him murder her. I tried to hide against the wall of the top bunk where I'd been sleeping, but as he went to leave the room, he turned around and had spotted me. He reaches over, grabs me, and then slits my throat. I crawled across the floor and tried to comfort my friend, but I realized that she couldn't speak. What I found out later was that her windpipe had been slashed, and a vocal cord was nicked during the attack. I remember realizing that I needed to get out of the house. So despite being in just my pajamas and having no shoes on, I walked to the neighbor's yard real quick and banged on the door for help. I was rushed to surgery, and upon waking up, provided enough of the description to the investigators that they were able to identify him. Later, I was forced to pick him out of a photo lineup while still in the hospital. When he was arrested, he said that he was finally glad that he got caught. I was tired of doing all of this. 9 months later, I had to stand to testify against him for my own attempted murder and the murder of my friend Kathy, who I had witnessed. The jury took an hour before convicting him on all accounts. He was sentenced to death and executed in 2014.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.